Hi, Ian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Geoff. Yeah, really appreciate the opportunity, and nice to be able to see you for a change.
Yes, absolutely. I was looking at my notes. The last time we spoke as a podcast was back in, where was it? April 2015. I think a few
Oh,
things have changed since then.
there you go. I think that podcast is still on my website actually, because it was a good wide-ranging interview, I thought. So, hence, I'm happy to have a chat again.
And of course, the prompt for it is this. So, your fabulous new book, and I do think it is fabulous. I think it's kind of that beautiful next step in what you've been talking about for a long time here. So, it's heart leadership, become the wise leader you want to be. And that's really what we want to talk about today. Where'd the book come from? What's it about? How people can get it? Maybe even how you produced it, and whatever else comes up in the conversation. So, tell us
Yes.
about your book.
Well, I mean, it's like everything. It's an evolution, isn't it? I mean, it's a journey, and it really, I guess, began back. I can remember the date actually. It was September the 15th, 2017. My wife that day received her registration as a marriage celebrant,
Oh, wow.
but it was also the day she received a cancer diagnosis.
Ooh.
And it wasn't grim, and she immediately went into treatment. And the drugs almost killed her. I tell the full story in the book, but it sent us both on a journey to explore not so much what's in our head, but what's in our hearts. We found doctors. There's a few exceptions, but we found doctors know about trauma and drugs, but they don't necessarily know a lot about well-being. They don't necessarily know what's in our heart. And what we discovered on that journey, Carol particularly searching for her own answers, which in the end led to her getting well.
Oh, good.
We discovered the folk at Heart Math. Um, we discovered in numerous different angles that the heart knows. We just got to learn to listen to it first and tell our brains to be quiet. And I think like a lot of blokes, that was my modus operandi. I was used to following my heart because that's what I've been doing over a number of over 30 years. When I first left the corporate world and started out my own, I really was following my heart, but very soon my head took over, and and I think that's the way of a lot of people. And so I began to explore this idea of tell my mind to be quiet, listen to my heart first. And I discovered in my own experience that my heart knows.
Oh, that's spectacular. And I
And
really love that it was kind of like you were jolted into a different awareness around it. So life
yes,
was
well,
probably going along and there was no need to question a lot of stuff. But that's a
that's true. I
pretty,
mean, I was, we were quite comfortable in how we were, things were going. But then as Carol got better and I started to work with this more personally, then I reached out to some of my clients and began to workshop some of what was new ideas, new material from my past works. And I've been thinking about because long before coronavirus, I made the shift to doing most of my work online, and so I was already zoomed in, as they say, long before the virus. But I started workshopping with a few people who I thought were really open to this idea of heart leadership. I also co-created a program last year with a colleague, Susan Finesse, about strategic heartistry, and that as an alternative to strategic planning. And that conversation, along with many other conversations, really, I guess, made me aware that heart leadership was actually at the core of all of my work, and that I should be paying more attention to it. And the more I spoke to my close clients about this, the more that became the case. Um, and so a book started emerging. I began with a mnemonic because I was helping the people I was working with to remember it. And so I began with harmony with yourself, seeking harmony with other people and with the planet, listening to your heart, listening to your mind, then engaging your hands. And the consequence of all that was happenstance.
okay. Yep.
Being the word I discovered had a H in it, which helped the mnemonic, but it means, coincidence or serendipity, synchronicity, however you might look at it. And my clients really loved the model. And so, the book really emerged using that model. And it flowed. I wrote the book in about 6 months.
That's pretty good.
Which, previous books have taken me a lot longer than 6 months,
Mm.
as you would know yourself, having written, what have you written? I think 10 or 12.
Something like that.
And up until this moment, I had found, although I was very disciplined, I've been writing 500 words a day for 40 years as a discipline. Most of it's rubbish and doesn't go anywhere. But the discipline, but I always found writing books and writing articles and so on, I found it hard work. But hearing my heart first of all, really focusing on being in harmony with myself and then listening to my heart, what I discovered was a flow to my writing, and all of a sudden writing wasn't hard anymore.
That's interesting.
And it just flowed. I mean, one day I was waiting for my car to be serviced. In 2.5 hours, I wrote 5,000 words.
Oh, wow. You should do that every week.
That's never happened to me ever. But the whole thing flowed. And then I put the working draft out to 25 or so people, including yourself. And the feedback I got was that it could be a little bit more together, and that some of the things about the heart were clear, but not so much the lining up or the flow to the head and the hands. And so I did some more workshopping with my clients and ended up with the final book. I also added a prologue and an epilogue to the original working draft, which kind of pulled it all together more. And most people have said there's a flow to it that wasn't there in the working draft. And I'm very happy with it now. There's, I personally sent out the 50th copy this morning, actually. I'm signing just 100, and I sent out the 50th one this morning. And it's also selling quite well on Amazon and other places.
Great.
So I'm very pleased with the journey to get here and what's happening now.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting twist, isn't it? You set out to write this particular book in the leadership domain, but here you've got this beautiful example of how it's freed you up with your writing. And the way I hear it, and I'd love to get your comment on this, is that it's when I'm in my head, I'm trying to get it right, and there's all this rational stuff trying to, this is the right thing, and I need arguments for it. But when I'm kind of in my more heart or intuitive space, it's free for it. I'm freer for it to be my opinion about, here's what I just think the next move is.
Yeah,
is that fit from a leadership perspective?
I think, look, the brain is a wonderful instrument. It's a marvel. It's brilliant at how to, but what I've discovered, it's not so good at the why and what. Whereas the heart is the why. And as we know from Simon Sinek's work and other folk, starting with why is a key.
Yeah.
And so what I learned, that when we hear our hearts truly, we stop second guessing ourselves, and then we can move to the mind and engage with our minds, because that's the how-to. I mean, there's a lot of past value in our minds, but the heart is coming from the present. That's another thing that I learned. The heart's the now. And it's the reality of now, and accepting the reality of now. One of the stories that I share in the book comes from one of the heart leadership enthusiasts who's a member of my regular groups, Brad Smith. He talks about, rather than a new normal, he talks moving from normal to now. And that's one of the stories that I share in the book. And I think that's really true. The heart is the present moment. It's about the why and the what. The head is more the how. And of course, the hands then, work out the who, where, and the when.
I really like that you haven't thrown out the head. It's kind of this meshing of it to say, the head by itself is very useful, but not enough. And what we actually need to do is mesh it in with the heart.
True. And I think there's this natural flow, heart, head, hands. Lots of people have used that process that metaphor, and originally found it on the internet. There's lots of people have used that idea, but I haven't come across anyone who's used the idea in the way that I have to suggest a flow, but also to suggest a wholeness, a coherence, if you will, starting with harmony. I think I've met lots of leaders in my time. I've worked with more than 1,000 leaders one-on-one, some really great ones. And one of the things that I've learned through the experience of working with other people is that a lot of people haven't focused on the whole self. They've focused on the business, all coming from the head, the numbers, all that stuff. And we need that, but we miss out on a whole lot of other important things. And so the idea of heart leadership is to put it all together, and it says lead from your heart, lead with your heart, but coming from a place of being in harmony with yourself. So, and then engage the head and so on.
Yeah. So where does emotions fit in here? So it's not just, we're not saying head, emotion, hands. Heart's got a different spin on it to just emotion. It's not pure emotion. Is that accurate?
Well, I think it's a feeling, which it could be an emotion. But in the book, I talk about the heart qualities, which I first learned from the heart math folk. And in the book, I talk about 8 such qualities. And it's a quality, it's a so it's more than an emotion. I mean, one of them, of course, is love. Yeah. And in the book,
we're not allowed to talk about love in business.
Well,
don't you know that?
Look, I think Stephen Farber's right. His latest book is called "Love Is Just Damn Good Business," and I think he's absolutely right. And I talk about love from the perspective of the ancient Greeks' use of it. I mean, they had, everyone knows Eros and agape probably is the 2 famous ones, romantic love and spiritual love. I came at it from the word philia, which means affectionate regard. And what I've discovered, that when there's affectionate regard for colleagues in the workplace, that performance improves. And I've been measuring this now for a very long time. And the more affectionate regard there is, and the more genuineness that there is, and it involves some of the other heart qualities too. I mean, as I say, I use 8 in the book. Another one of them is appreciation. Another one is kindness. Another one is compassion. So these are more than emotions, more than feelings. They're actually ways of being.
Yeah. And I think it's a nice, I'm kind of poking a little bit here, because traditionally business was all about moving stuff around. And so we have this very transactional language about it. Whereas what you're getting down to is the heart of us actually talking people to people. Well, and that's kind of a huge shift in itself, and an obvious one.
In a way, I mean, I think I call it, who before do. It's really about we're human beings, as many people have said, not human doings.
Yeah.
And the focus in most businesses is about doing. And I think the focus should be more about being, and then let people do their own thing. Because, we don't need to be told what to do, even though this is what the Industrial Revolution, it's still the hangover.
Yeah.
And I think there's crazy talk, about a 4th Industrial Revolution. Although I think it's nonsense. We don't need any more Industrial Revolutions. What we need is a human revolution. And some writers, like, say, a Gerd Leonhard or, Returner, who wrote The Age of Discovery, I forget his co-author, but they reckon that there's a new renaissance happening since about the 90s. And I agree with them that this new renaissance is a shift away from, as it was back in the 15th century, that was away from feudal systems, it was away from dogma and doctrine that controlled people, which is what the Industrial Revolution did.
Yep.
It was moving away from that. It was focusing on people being true to themselves, finding their essence, is the way I described in the book, and then being left alone to do it, because we don't need to be told what to do. Yeah. Not when we're following our hearts. And yet most of the workforce is about being told what to do.
And for a knowledge worker who knows stuff up here, and spends a lot of their time interacting with other people, that makes perfect sense, because the knowledge worker is the expert in that something that they don't want to be told what to do. It might be a case of, we need to go down that path, but telling them exactly what to do is going to ruin the whole game for them.
Well, that's how authoritarian places work.
Yeah.
I mean, the knowledge worker was a Drucker term, and it might have been relevant in the 1950s. I don't think it's relevant anymore. We're not knowledge workers. I mean, one of the bits of research that I quote in the book comes from Dr. Jill Bolte, who's a neuroscientist, and a lot of her work was based on her own experience recovering from a stroke. And she says, we are feeling creatures who think.
Aha. Okay, good. So instead of a knowledge worker, what are we?
Well, I think, yes, we need knowledge, but in my opinion, we need more wisdom.
Okay, great.
Not, because I think we know, because these days everyone is getting skills training. If people are not being given the skills at the workplace is not going to last long in the 21st century. And so people have the knowledge, they have the know-how, but what we need more of is bringing, the best version of this one-of-a-kind self that each of us is, bringing that person to our work. That's a whole different ballgame.
So what are some tips, tricks, suggestions you can say? How can I do this today? What would you suggest?
Well, I think first of all, it's just learn to listen to your heart and keep your head quiet.
Yep.
One of the ways that I practice this myself, I was lucky during a recovery from illness many years ago to learn meditation. So I already knew how to quieten my mind. But we have this constant chatter going on. It's like this person sitting on our shoulder going, that won't work, or, whatever it is. Some people call it the inner critic.
Yep.
So it's telling that person to be quiet. I even had to say it out loud for a while. I'd just say, look, you're not needed right now. And just really focus on my state of being.
Yeah.
Was I really coming to the situation from a place of love, from a place of kindness, from a place of appreciation, etc. And when I was really sitting in that place, I would then engage my hand, my head and my hands to work out what's next.
Yeah, beautiful.
And so it's just that simple exercise. Say again?
And it's kind of that repeating that cycle of keep coming back to that space.
Yeah, it is. Hence harmony, heart, head, hands, happenstance. Start again.
I really like happenstance as in not just the way you came about it, like it was kind of a spontaneous thing, but it actually does put you in the moment rather than constantly be in the head and trying to plan things forward.
Yes.
I think we can be much more authentic, more engaging, more present to other people as well.
Well, wonderful, wonderful piece of wisdom that I use in the book that came from Viktor Frankl, who his version of therapy, logotherapy, he called it, but he wrote the manuscript for that in Auschwitz. I mean, enough said.
It's hard to get your head around that, isn't it?
But one of his beautiful pieces of wisdom was that between stimuli and response, there's a space. And in that space, he said, lies our freedom.
Yeah.
And so I just think that's a wonderful, that's the difference between wisdom and knowledge. You don't know that, you have to be that. And the more I work with this, so something would happen, stimuli comes in, and I would take that moment, which is 90 seconds, to really feel it in my heart. And over time, took me 18 months, not to respond from the head, but to respond from the heart. And what I found was that happenstance happened more often than not. I found a flow, to things. I found myself less anxious about things that I might have been in the past. One of the interesting things for me is I stopped. I've been a make it happen kind of person for all my life, but this process has changed me. I'm now more letting it happen.
Aha, that's a big change.
You know, some of the old habits, you know, they still arrive, you know, occasionally. I mean, no one's perfect, but there's a lot more flow, a lot more letting it happen. And even in work, you know, I sort of made a decision. I really only want to work with people who are enthusiastic about heart leadership.
Mm.
And as a consequence, you know, some people who weren't dropped off, you know, they just disappeared. And
I
now,
think that's a really good thing, by the way.
me too. I mean, and it's a lot easier than firing them if they just disappear. But, you know, what remains now is a core group of people that really want to do the work. And of course, for me, that's energizing. You know, I'm a fan of Jason Fox's one word, and my word this year is energized.
Perfect.
And a part of it's come from this regular group of people who really want to dig, as you know, and keep on digging into this idea that we lead with and from our hearts.
And I'm guessing if you're letting things come rather than forcing them, you're actually conserving your energy at the same time.
There's no question about that. And as you know, I've had my own health challenges, and one of the things that I've had to do is to really work on conserving my energy. And a consequence of that, I have to take these drugs to keep my melanoma at bay. And as a consequence, if I can get really fatigued if I don't watch myself. And what I've learned, even though I'm working about a quarter of the time I once did, I'm 10 times more productive because I don't have this baggage around about worrying about, you know, stuff that used to worry me in the mind before. And I really am able to approach most things with a cool head. As I say, no one's perfect, and we zip back into old ways sometimes. But the more I work at this, the happier I get, the more contented I get, and the less doubt and the less worry I have. Wayne Dyer called them life's two most useless emotions. I think he was pretty right. But I'm having a lot less doubt and a lot less worry by only using my mind to help me to do things. But I'm focused on being the best version of me first, and then move to the do.
And you've been workshopping this with a lot of clients over quite a long period of time as well. What sort of things are showing up for them?
Well, I think the surprising thing for some is the practicality of all of this. That it actually leads to better results quicker, which was not something that was expected. It's led to, you know, better home lives for lots of people. You know, the stress of being locked in, which has been the case for most of my clients, some of them with young children, it's helped them to cope with that and all of the things that go along with that a lot better than what would have happened otherwise. It's reduced anxiety with people. It's helped people. I think we all have a degree of imposter syndrome. You know, we say, why me? The more we lead and the more success we have with leading, the more we ask, why me? And a lot of my clients have felt that disappear, and that they're more comfortable in their own skin. One of the biggest ones is that they're not second guessing themselves as much as they used to, which I think is a byproduct of, you know, of what we're talking about.
Yeah, one of my favourite books from a few years ago was by John Kay, who was a professor at the London School of Economics, and the book was called Obliquity. And if you think about the word oblique, he basically, his premise was we get our results indirectly. And it's kind of this really interesting thing you're talking about here, that normally we go down the productivity path and it's all about, oh, do this more efficiently and all the rest of it. But what you've pointed to is if you shift the way of being, that stuff kind of just gets taken care of. Is that a way of saying it? It's indirect?
Yes, I think that's right. I haven't put it in such language, but I think in the book I talk about, because what I'm in, my work is about helping people to become the wise leaders they want to be.
Yeah.
And in the book there are pillars to that, and because I think the best workplaces that I've seen are where people feel valued, where people live the values, and where there's a focus on value delivery and exchange. So those three things: valued, values, valued. And the three foundations that lead to those things are people leadership, process innovation, and progress sustainability. And it's this progress sustainability that I think addresses this idea of progress rather than outcomes.
Yeah.
You know, I was a person focused on outcomes my whole life. I'm not anymore. I'm focused on following a process, or as Seth Godin called it, a practice. A book I recommend, by the way, his latest one, The Practice. Because we've all got a practice. It's our way of being and our way of doing. And Seth's work has helped me to really fine tune that for myself. And one of the consequences is we keep progress visible. So we're less worried about outcomes, more focused on progress.
Yeah.
I talk about the progress principle in the book, which was what I learned from Teresa Amberley and her husband, Stephen Kramer, who wrote that great book, The Progress Principle. And I referenced that a little in the book. It's this idea that we keep meaningful progress visible.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful.
Absolutely. That was the key thing that came up when I was writing about done and productivity. The number one piece is around motivation, and the key to motivation is some sense of movement towards something. The progress principle.
Yep, same thing. Same thing. Yeah. And I think also, and this is, I think, where we are in the 21st century in a hopefully soon a post-coronavirus world, I think meaning has become, a key for most people.
Yeah.
And meaningful, finding meaning in your work, I think is what's the quest for lots of people. And when we lead from our hearts and we focus on the person that we're looking at in the mirror and competing with that person and not worrying about competition with anyone else and being in harmony with ourselves, and then hearing our hearts, then engaging the mind, and then doing our work, I think it's one way to achieve more meaningful work. And that's been a common thread with the readers of the book so far, but also the people that have been working with it for some time. And even people that are kind of, new at it. One member of my group, Laura, whose story appears at the end of the book, I mean, I think she's been a heart leader a lot longer than what she might, might feel. But she took to this like a duck to water because it's very human, and I think what we've been taught is really inhuman in so many ways. We've been taught that you must be told what to do, that you don't speak until you're spoken to, and all these things that are a hangover from a different world. And I sense that one of the ways to peace in the world, in fact, I quoted this out there in various places yesterday, because the words of A.J. Musty came to me yesterday when I was just contemplating. And he said, there is no road to peace. Peace is the road.
Yes, we've got it round the wrong way, haven't we, most of the time?
And I sense that people want more peace in their lives, and heart leadership is a pathway to greater peace. And a consequence of that peace is, and it's in many ways a paradox, is that we do better work.
Yeah, that's the side effect piece, isn't it? My comment to you was that it was timely because I felt it made more sense in the coronavirus, the pandemic, and in lockdown. Is that accurate, or do you think it's kind of like, is this going to make more sense going back into the office surrounded by people, or does it make more sense now, or is that just the wrong question?
Well, I'm really I'm working towards helping people to not go back to normal. We had to drive out to Melbourne yesterday, Carol and I, and the smog's back and all the traffic bullshit's back.
Yeah.
And why would we do this to ourselves?
Yeah.
And so I don't want to go back to that world. I've got a couple of clients where up to 50% of their workforce don't want to go back to the office, and they're facilitating that kind of process. I think we've got to find something new and different and valuable and meaningful to do in CBDs.
Yeah.
You know, in my own view, the move to cities was a giant mistake made by civilization.
Yeah. Or it ran its course. It was useful
Yeah,
for a while.
it's definitely
And
done.
yeah.
But there's a
There was
lot,
actually, yeah.
but a
The
lot
other
of
thing
people, of course, their livelihoods were based on all those workers.
Mm.
And so we've got to find a different way. And I think there's many options. And, you know, the city of Melbourne's, you know, a great thing there. I mean, they do lots of things. There's more dining out on the footpath now, for example. So it's an experience.
Mm.
Um, and I think that it doesn't mean cities have to die. It just means that they have to live differently.
Yep. The next evolution, thanks.
Next
Yeah.
version. And
Yeah.
so I don't want to go back to normal. You know, I think airlines have got to really take a hard look at themselves. Their business model is not viable.
Mm.
You know, their industries don't exist without government handouts. So that to me says something's wrong with the industry.
Yeah.
And so that needs to be rethought.
Mm.
We don't need to be flying all the time as we've proven over the past year. You know, I think fossil fuel industry is another one. They don't exist without government subsidies either. And they don't employ as many people as they make out. And so there's this whole, you know, there's paradigm shifts that I think are happening. You know, we do not need a fossil fuel industry. We should have been transitioning 30 years ago or even longer.
Yep.
And I think the inevitable of those things will come, and we will end up transitioning away from those kinds of things. And all the BS that goes on in the political sphere about those things will disappear, I sense.
Yeah.
And that's another, I think, an outcome of focusing on human beings. It's like, you know, talk about Renaissance earlier. One of the dogma of right now is that data's the new oil and technology is the answer to everything. Well, no, it's not.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always amused by artificial intelligence because it's artificial. I'm amused by these things. Now, of course, you know, there's wonderful things that happen as a consequence of artificial intelligence. The vaccine was created using artificial intelligence. So I'm not knocking artificial intelligence, but my point is technology is not the answer if it doesn't enhance the human experience.
Mm.
And so I see a more human world in 2021 and beyond. And I think people that are focused on being inhuman, whether that's a president inciting violence or whatever it might be, I think that's an old world. And that world is disappearing at a fast rate of knots. And I hope that the disappearance continues to accelerate.
And I think that's probably a good segue into why people need the book. Because what I'm hearing is the layers that it can actually impact things. This is not just about, I'll do this differently. It's about live differently, see the world, create the world, be with people differently. And it has all these ripple effects. It's not just about you and your work and your productivity. It's not just about how you interact with your clients, customers, family, but it has this ripple effect of we're actually going to think about some of these things like climate change, leadership, politics differently as well, cities. So
I think so.
It's such a big shift.
And some of those, you know, as Buckminster Fuller, he was onto this a long time ago. You know, it's not about necessarily creating something that's new. What it is about is maybe building on something, but as a consequence of something that is new or something that works in a different way, old things become obsolete.
Yeah.
And I see this, you know, very much. The future is the way of leading, as in an authoritarian, dictatorial, telling people what to do. I think methods like heart leadership will make those old ways obsolete. I think one of the biggest things, and I say this right at the start of the book, and this has become the key to my work, and that is that doing heart leadership my way will not work for you. But the model is something that you can learn to use in your own way, your own best way. I say in the book that what I say is important, but it's nowhere near as important as what you hear yourself say to yourself and who you become and what you do next. And so although it's, you know, it is a model and it is a process and all of that, it's really designed to help people to apply the learnings in their own best way, not my way. And I think that's
Yeah.
also a new thing. And leadership was always many consultants and authors and so on. Take these 7 steps and you'll be a zillionaire, sort of thing. Well, I think that's an old world.
Yeah, totally
New
agree.
world says, here's the principle. Learn to apply that principle in your own best way.
Yeah, well, I've had people asking me how to write books, and it's like, well, you've got to find your best way. Here's the way that works for me. Try it out, but you've got to tweak it, twist it, find your way. So just on that, how did you write your book? What was your strategy for writing?
Well, pretty much I stayed with the, writing every day, but then it became more than 500 words. But I'd really try to write 1,500 words a day. That was my aim, which is about 5 A4 pages.
Yep.
And I tried to write without editing and just go back to it later.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a process in mind, and then to put that together in the working draft, and then once that's done, to get it out to people for feedback and input.
Yep.
And then probably the critical place is the editing. I'm blessed that I've got 2 good editors. One's a person who's read my work for more than 30 years. And the most important person is my wife, who knows me better than anyone else. And when she tells me this doesn't make sense, I've got to pay attention.
Perfect.
So it's really working through that. And I think one thing I've learned, this, it's having the ideal reader in mind all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Will this be valuable for them?
Yep.
And so they're the kinds of things. And I think then the publishing too. I mean, Carol's taken over the publishing process. In the last 2 bits, we went through Ingram Spark, which is a distributor place. Carol learnt the process, but what we've discovered is that if you get it right, you can basically have your book out in the world. In their case, they've got more than 40 distributors. So once you get it right and you get it uploaded to the Ingram site, in our case, it was on Amazon 24 hours later.
Geez, that's good.
Because they've got the process right.
Yeah.
And Carol's worked out how to do the Kindle versions and so on, as well. So I think if you spend the time working out how it works, and that's what she's done, which has freed me up. I just focus on the writing.
Perfect.
I don't have to worry about the other stuff, because it did my head in. Whereas she's willing to work at it until she finds out how to do it all, and then it becomes a flow from there. So this is the second one we've done with Ingram Spark, and this time it was a lot easier than the first. The Kindle version, of Heart Leadership, which comes out soon, was easier than the last one, and I'm sure the next one, because this is part of a series of 12. So I'm sure that by the time we get to the next one, it'll be even easier.
Perfect. So where can someone get a copy of Heart Leadership?
Well, if they want a signed version, there are still 50 of those. I'm only signing 100, so there's still 50 of those. They can go to my website and sign up for the event that's on the 24th of February.
Yep, perfect.
Overseas folk, it takes 3 to 4 weeks, I've discovered, in the coronavirus world, to get things. So I will send people a PDF so they can read it before the seminar. So that gets them the signed copy. If they just want to buy it normally, it's available via my website. But really, your best bookstore, it's all in Book Depository in the UK, for example, which is my favourite bookstore. It's in Booktopia in Australia. It's on all the Amazons. Basically, just Google it. But if you want one of the 100 signed ones, go to my website.
And what's your website address, Ian?
It's ianberry.biz, B-I-Z.
Ian, I-A-N, Berry, B-E-R-R-Y.biz, B-I-Z.
That's it.
Perfect. Well, great to talk to you, Ian. I think we could have talked for another 5 hours, just pulling all the pieces and putting it back together. But I'm guessing, I reckon you'll agree with this, that reading it's the first step, but going off and doing it and being it and living it and practicing it is the key.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. So, yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity, Geoff.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to have this conversation. Even though I'd read the book and we'd had some discussions about it, it's great to return to it and just explore it in different ways. So I've enjoyed that as well.
I must say too, when people go to the website, even if you don't get the book, as I was writing the book, I recorded a whole lot of videos. So there's 24 videos. Basically, it's a course, one every fortnight, say. And I also did 24 podcasts. The videos are all under 5 minutes.
Yep.
And the podcasts are all under 10 minutes. So even just listening to one of those videos, one of those podcasts, or watching one of those videos would tell people whether the book is for them or not. Perfect. But that's stuff that's available. If people go to my website, you'll see there's a tab that says Heart Leadership Resources. That's where all the videos and podcasts, well, that's where you access them from.
Yeah, and I'll just warn the listeners in advance, there's a lot of other good stuff on your website, so you might want to allocate a little bit of time just to explore, or at the very least, bookmark the page so you can come back.
Yeah, look, I've tried to make my website as a resource center for people interested in heart leadership. It's not, and that's what it's designed for. Yeah. So yeah, there is quite a bit of stuff there, but I've tried to segment it now so that the Heart Leadership Resources that's got its own page. But it's a nice way to see whether the book might be for you before you buy it.
Yep, perfect. Well, thank you for being on the show, Ian. Great to talk to you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.